4 reasons you want a financial advisor. One is to keep you from making mistakes. It's buying something that you shouldn't buy because you heard it around the water cooler. The second one is to save you time. Anybody can go research, get their CFP, their certified financial planning. They can go through all the courses to be able to do it. You can learn everything you need to learn about financial services, but do you want to have the time doing it? Or do you want somebody to take that time and give you the pros and cons of each option? The other piece is the financial advisor hopefully increases your financial life. And it doesn't have to be just a return. It could be saving money in taxes. It could be helping convince you to save more on a monthly basis. But the last piece of why I think a lot of people hire financial advisors is peace of mind. It's knowing somebody else is there to be able to kind of walk you through how to hit your financial goals without you making poor decisions or emotional-based decisions with that. And somebody there to bounce ideas off of. That it's not just you or somebody, your brother, that you think's a financial whiz, to just listen to them for advice.
Hey, it's Rocky. Welcome to Richer Soul. Today's guest is Jeremy Straub, who will share his journey of success in life. Imagine it's 12 months from now, and you've achieved your major life goals. How does it feel to be in the best shape of your life? To wake up energized, excited about the day? To have great relationships and friends who support you and propel you forward? How does it feel to have an excess of money, to be able to make the choices you want? To be fearless and open to trying new adventures? Imagine being connected to the universe and it providing everything you desire. It's possible over time, and your past does not dictate your future. The only thing holding you back from this vision is you. It's time to take control of our thoughts and use them to our advantage. Welcome to Richer Soul, where we achieve our dreams and create harmony to health, wealth, relationships, time, and spirituality. If you have not had a chance to listen to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create the life of your dreams. You can also find all the show notes for this episode at richersoul.com. Today's quote comes from Warren Buffett. The difference between successful people and really successful people is the really successful people say no to almost everything. What are you saying no to? I know I said yes too often, and on times on purpose to experience more and not be held back. Now I'm in the stage of life of saying no a lot to many things. Sometimes I get stuck in a rut and I have to examine if what I said yes to is still serving me, and then make the choice to pull the plug on that activity. It's been a major theme this year to say no and be more focused on what I really want to do with intention, which of course leads to success. And success leaves clues. Our guest today will share his journey. We left out a lot of the down parts to focus on what works. Just understand we all face struggles, and that's normal. Think about what action step you can take in your life based on some of the choices that he made. It's not easy, and we talk about the fear of making some of those choices. Also, be clear in what you want. Listen in for how Jeremy gets clarity in his life and how he tracks his progress and goals. How he finds mentors and people to push him into thinking bigger. We examine his mindset around money and other areas of life. Sometimes in life we need help. That's why I have coaches, mentors. I still participate in mastermind groups. It's all about constant improvement, questioning, and being called out when I'm not living in congruence with what I said I wanted to do. Our guest is Jeremy Straub. He is the founder and CEO of Coastal Wealth with more than 20 years in executive level positions with Fortune 500 companies. He's considered a financial industry thought leader who brings energy and passion to helping people preserve wealth. Jeremy couldn't ignore his inherent entrepreneurial spirit and desire to create a financial services and wealth management firm of his own. In 2016, Coastal Wealth was created. Let's meet Jeremy and see how he did it. Welcome to Rich Your Soul, Jeremy Straub. It's great to have you join us today.
Well, I'm excited to be here. Appreciate the offer.
And I'm excited to learn from you. We always like to start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
So my father was an entrepreneur. He ended up owning a few car dealerships, but he worked his way up from selling cars to owning the dealerships. And he taught me a lot about business. He was an avid reader with a lot of the old motivational books and emotional intelligence, and got me reading some entrepreneur biographies early on. So I would say it was a pretty big influence for my father in the business side.
So it sounds like he was intentional with that.
It was his own passion. I don't know if he was intentional with it or not, but, he had me read in Lee Iacocca's biography as like one of my first book reports. He had me reading How to Win Friends and Influence People because it helped to impact him. Had me reading some of Tony Robbins' books early on around neuro-linguistic programming. So he was thoughtful in getting me to read that, I guess. Yeah, it was probably intentional if I really think about it, but that was his passion too. So I think he was just sharing his own passion with me.
So how old were you when you were reading Tony Robbins?
It was high school. Almost all my book reports in high school ended up being some type of business, motivational, or inspirational books.
So how did he get you to do that? Because, most kids aren't going to listen to dad when they say, read this book. And
I guess I had some interest because if we were doing a road trip, he would listen to audiobooks on tape and be like Awaken the Giant Within. So I got stuck listening to him anyway. As for the book report pieces, I just didn't find myself enjoying fiction early on. And so it was an easy read to be able to go through some type of motivational, inspirational, or business book. For some reason, it appealed to me already. And I think I could see how it applied to making money. And for him, his whole life revolved around business. So there was the only thing I had in common with him. So if I wanted to have a conversation with him or spend time with him, it typically had to be around that.
Interesting. And the
good
world,
or bad.
Good or bad. But it's funny because I remember when I was a kid growing up, I had to listen to the AM radio my dad played, right? And it was always that type of stuff. Today, every kid's got a head button, right? They're not this transfer of knowledge or this even exposure is probably disappearing more and more from parent to child. And so that's kind of societally a shame.
It's hard to, so I have a 9-year-old and a 4-year-old. And with my 9-year-old, I'm trying to be more thoughtful with it. There's a number of books now that are written around entrepreneurship for that age, which I didn't expect it to be. My hard part is when I'm reading them to her is keeping her interest versus another one, right? So I've tried to be intentional in the books that I've read to her. I've tried to explain to her just some general business concepts to understand it. There was one book that I found really interesting, and I'll have to get to you in the show notes, but it was like how a pencil was made. And it went back to like where the paint comes from Italy, the yellow paint on top of it. And she was just shocked on how much went through the whole supply chain to be able to just get a pencil. And that was like the one book that she understood the intensity of how a product's manufactured and how a business is run. That was, I thought, was a really good book. I'll find it if I can for the show notes for you guys.
Well, thank you. So did your dad teach you any money skills through this process as well?
He was always focused on top line and how to be able to drive revenue. I think he was an internal salesman at heart, right? So, as even when he went over to running the dealerships, he was always stuck on driving revenue. So, but he told me a story that stuck with me. He would keep a yellow piece of paper in his pocket, right? He dropped out of college to start selling cars, as in my mom got in a little shotgun wedding. So, and when he went through that though, he had a yellow piece of paper of all his debt. And then as it kind of, and he just kept checking off on how his debt was going to go. And then as he started acquiring assets or buying into the dealership, it was his net worth. And he just constantly tracked his net worth all the time in his pocket. And that kind of gave me a scorecard, again, right or wrong, of like how I should be measuring how I'm doing. And I think that kind of always stuck in my head. And then he had this one concept I remember telling me about the service department. And he said, if I had an extra $1 of what the billable hour is in the service department, that can make me an extra $200,000 plus a month in the dealership. And like, it blew my mind that you can make this one little tweak in your business or one little tweak in your pricing, and you can make that much more money in such a short period of time to be able to do it. And that's where I sat there going, how am I supposed to work with somebody and be a W-2 employee for a long time when I don't have the power to make those tweaks to make a big difference in it? That being said, I was a W-2 employee for 15 years, but I still, it's that part in my head just kept that entrepreneur itch coming, because I had this concept that I can be able to make small little shifts in the business that could have good economic wins for myself or the business.
And I think that's a big part of what I do. And it's amazing how, if you look at all the different levers in the business, a percent here, a percent there, percent over here, can massively multiply through. And the same thing happens in real estate, especially when you're doing multiple properties at the same time. A little thing here multiplies, and it goes in reverse too. So small changes to the negative multiply to big negatives. These principles run both ways.
Yeah, I'm really stuck on this concept of the little decisions matter. I think we get so stuck on making these real big decisions, and I'm always trying to be real thoughtful about the little stuff, because if I get enough little decisions together that are right, I end up finding I'm more successful than I'm not. So I just focus in on those next 5-10 minutes that I'm dealing with and the decision I'm working through.
Very, very nice. And so why did you end up being an employee after learning all of this and knowing all of this?
So somebody told me your first job out of college is to get a sales job and get a sales job in a very good sales training program, because you're going to use it for whatever it is. And I've given the example before, but I was at a concert and thought I was going to see a musician. We did this VIP thing ahead of time on it. And so we go there for this VIP, and all it was a pitch for him to pitch his wine to everybody that was in VIP and try to get us to be able to buy cases of his wine. And at that point, I'm like, this guy is John Legend. This guy is a great musician, yet he's trying to sling alcohol at one of his concerts to be able to do it, or his wife's cookbook. And so, it just kind of hit me that every position you need to have is in sales. And so I understand now the mentality of why somebody gave me that advice is to go get a sales job right when you first start. And ideally in a Fortune 500 company with a very good training program. Most small businesses don't have good training programs. They don't have good development plans or anything like that. So what I did was I joined, it was American Express Financial Advisors at the time, that had a really good training program, and learned how to be a financial advisor. And that was my entry point into being a W-2 employee. But I went there with the idea of getting a good sales training program.
What kept you there?
If you pick a certain industry, there's certain industries that are more lucrative than others. And financial services is a lucrative industry, just as tech has been lucrative for a lot of other people on that. So I ended up starting to do well, starting to make a good amount of money. They do a good job of, tapping you on the shoulder, getting you excited about the different opportunities, and kind of really selling an entrepreneur type business where, yes, you're an entrepreneur, you have upside because you're in a compensation program that has upside in it. And you start to do really well and you enjoy it. You enjoy all the recognition, you enjoy all the accolades, you're doing really well on it. And it just, next thing you know, the years tick by, you're still developing, you're still making money, and you're having fun, and you just don't make any decisions. And I always tell people the way that I retain, and I try to retain talent, is if you have three things. If they feel like they're compensated adequately or good, if they're enjoying the job, have fun with the people around them, and they actually like doing it. And then lastly, if they feel like they're getting developed and trained, they feel like they're learning. And if you got two of those three, usually people hang out. Even if they don't feel like they're getting paid well, but they're having fun and they're learning, they'll hang in there for a while. And I found I had all three when I was in that career, that it was really hard to be able to leave.
But you did. You walked away from a 7-figure income.
I did.
So what happened?
I think that there was a couple pieces to it. As you get up into the executive roles, the air starts to get a lot more thin, and you don't have as many opportunities as you did before. So you're waiting for somebody to screw up. You're waiting for somebody to, retire, or you're hoping there's going to be a new role up there. So if you're waiting for like a president role in a Fortune 500 company, there's not a ton of president roles sitting there. And then you got to go change companies if you're going to do it. You're changing companies, you got to go build a lot of credibility elsewhere. You lost all your reputation that you built for the last 10, 15 years. So I got stuck where there was a very young CEO. He was 52, 53. The guy was making over $100 million. He isn't going anywhere. And you had a president underneath him that was in his early 40s that was hoping maybe the CEO role would come up sometime, but he isn't going anywhere. And so for me, I just didn't see myself as a senior executive in a company being a career role. And many people are happy in that career role for 20 years. I was in my mid 30s and I just could not see myself making a career position out of that. So I felt like I had to make a change.
Was that easy to walk away from?
Not at all. I just had at the time I had a 2-year-old daughter. I was going to move cross country for the business opportunity I had for the business I was purchasing. It was a very hard decision. I remember resigning and I didn't want to hit the button. And my wife at the time, I was like, I can't hit the button telling them I'm resigning. You have to hit. She had to hit the enter button in the email just to ask for the meeting for the person to tell them I'm resigning. Like I was scared out of my mind to be able to do it. But I had a good support system around. I bounced it around a number of different mentors. I felt like it was the time in my life I had to be able to do it. But it was probably the first 2 years I questioned if I made the right decision that whole time. It took me a while to feel comfortable with the decision, especially as you don't know what you don't know. And then you start getting punched in the face as you're trying to build and scale a business. And you think you might have screwed up or might have overassessed your talent when you're sitting in that role.
And that happens. And I think that's the important thing for people to realize is that even when you're successful, you still have fears. You still don't have all the answers, but you just got to step forward into it and take action and move forward. Otherwise, I don't know, you would have gotten stuck where you were. And as time went on, it would probably get less and less fun.
I'm 100%. I remember I read a quote from, there's a Fortune 500 CEO and they asked him about something. He just said this comment, it just stuck with me. Every day I'm trying to become qualified for the job I'm in. Now this is CEO of a Fortune 500 company, basically saying every day he's working to be qualified for the role he's in. And you know what? The truth of the matter is, I think we're all doing that. I think, we all have a sense of going, hey, can I do this or not? Do I have what it takes? Because as soon as you have what it takes to do what you're doing right now, your goal moves, you want something bigger and you're like, whoa, can I handle that level of scale? Or I just made an acquisition. Can I be able to really putting all that together? Now the business is a lot bigger. So you're constantly putting yourself in situations where you're uncomfortable and you're not sure if you're ready or not. And that's where you lean in, you push harder to make sure you are ready.
And that's all you can do. So clearly you walked away and now you've successfully built, is it one or multiple businesses at this point?
There's a number of different companies that I have. The main business is Coastal Wealth, which is a financial services firm. And from that, there's been offshoots of companies that are in similar industries or closed industries that help support the bigger business. And so the idea is it's a financial advisory firm. We have 400 financial advisors across the Southeast. And we help people financially plan their lives. And so from there, there's other businesses that help support our advisors best serving those clients. And then there's the random businesses you end up getting into, like a restaurant or something like that, that as soon as you get some opportunities, you start jumping into some other stuff. And I don't know if that's the smartest thing to be able to do in hindsight. I think it's I joke all the time, guys want cars and bars. So they want to own like a car dealership, they want to have a bunch of cars, or they want to own a bar or restaurant. And I think I fell in that. But there's some other industries too.
I always look at the restaurant industry as a hobby because most of them don't make money.
Yeah, so you need a really good operator to be able to do it. I fortunately have had odd success in there because I've partnered up with the right people that have done really well with it. That being said, I lucked out. I 100% realized that was luck, that I ended up knowing the right people to really operate the business. And I realized that what the value I add was hard to replicate inside a restaurant type business. So a little bit, but not to the level that I thought I would be able to add value.
Well, that's cool. I mean, the thing that I like about the car business is you always have a free car, so to speak.
I had free cars till I was 25 because of that. My father had the car dealerships and it was great. Back then too, they sold cell phones because it was like mobile phones were only sold through the cars. So they had free cell phones too for a while. No car insurance. It was a great deal.
Those are the things that people don't realize is that sometimes in certain business models, you get the advantages of perks that don't really show up somewhere. And that's one of those classic ones, especially in the used car business. Because if you have a used car for 4 months and you put a couple thousand miles on it, it's not going to change the value of the car at all, which means every 4 months you can drive something new for 4 months, put it back on the lot, and it literally costs you nothing.
I had a new car every 4 or 5 months. The first time I had to keep a car for a few years, I'm like, this is really strange. I'm like, I have to keep a car for a while. And I had the problem where I would never buy a new car when I first got out of the car business with my dad. I would end up keeping a car for 7 years because I couldn't rationalize buying a new car and how much money I would lose on it.
Smart move. So you've done some wild and crazy things, including spending $330,000 on a Bored Ape NFT.
This is always a fun thing to talk about. So, fortunately, it wasn't. When we bought it, it was $330,000. But the crypto was up at that point, so it was really not my cost basis for that because we were able to buy with a lot of appreciated crypto to do it. The reason for that purchase, though, was around attracting the millennial investor and around the millennial advisor, and the idea that that Bored Ape was going to be our mascot for Coastal Wealth and providing financial literacy. So, if there was an ape talking about financial literacy, and it was one of those like sexy things people were talking about at the time, I thought it would be attractive for people that, were investing in crypto to want to actually do traditional investing with our advisors around stocks, bonds, mutual funds, annuities, insurance. And I thought that would be a lead-in for them to think we're a progressive company. And then same thing with recruiting also. I thought we'd be able to find young talent thinking we're a more progressive firm. That being said, we got it. We started going down the path of animating it. And then that's when the NFT bubble burst. And I did not think it would be a good look to have that as our mascot. So, yeah, that's the story of the ape.
Well, you kind of lucked out in the sense that you didn't go too far down the path before you pulled the plug.
And to be honest, it's had utility where it's kicked off different things for those that know the NFT space that, we were able to sell right away to offset even more of the cost to be able to do it. So, the virtual land, the metaverse kicked off some stuff called the other side. Other types of NFTs got kicked off that you could be able to sell. So it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, but it was not one that we're going to use for marketing anytime soon.
And those markets do go up and down, and they surprise me. And it seems all of a sudden the government is now getting into the crypto space as far as legal action and regulation. And it's funny because the latest round of people who just got in trouble were celebrities who were promoting crypto and didn't notify people that they were getting paid to do it. Yep. And it's funny, like they're not even in the crypto market. They're marketers and they got taken out. It's funny how those things come to play.
Well, there's reasons we have rules in the securities industry. And I think people in the crypto space really felt that the idea of regulation was not needed because of how crypto was positioned. And the truth of the matter is, it is. So like in the security space, you can't have a spokesperson like that saying, I use this financial advisor and here's why, because they know that celebrities, that endorsement level is not a positive thing for investors to be able to do because people will chase after those endorsements. And the fact that they could do it in the crypto space, which is investment area, it was free reign. So I hope, to be honest, that they regulate it as the securities industry has been regulated. And I think that will help give investors confidence back if that is an asset class they want to be able to do. And it's one of these ones where I think you saw as the rug got pulled on a lot of these, and you saw what happened to FTX. And, I think at that point, you read Giselle just came out about how much money she lost in the deal and talked about that she didn't realize it. So I think you have a lot of people now that would prefer to be regulated and be a more mainstream space and hopefully become a risky asset class that people are starting to look at.
Interesting to watch. Not my thing. And so I just stay away. I don't have any FOMO because I've learned over the years how to stop that. Because every time I do it, I usually get burned. Yeah, that's what Warren Buffett does. That's
like what Warren Buffett says, only invest in what you understand. And it is extremely hard to understand exactly how blockchain works and how that's going to apply to building a digital currency and why you think that'll have value and understand all the pieces associated with that, or NFTs. I mean, I'm not surprised if NFTs end up at zero. So, who knows? That's not advice, by the way. I'm not giving financial advice, but it's one of these ones where I think that if the regulation comes through in the right way and you're comfortable in that space to understand it, then it might be a space that people start to wade back into. But I think, the part that I would say as an investor is you want to make sure you understand any investment you're involved in. And it's not many investors that got in there just had FOMO, like you said. And there was no professionals out there helping guide them that were, supported or regulated in a way that had to have their best interests in mind.
No, it was all pump and dump. I mean, you could see it. It was clear as day. And you can always tell these things because they all use this, coming back to sales, they always use the same type of techniques. And it makes it very clear what's going on. And so I learned to stay away, and not always easy.
Smart man.
Not always easy. So a big part of what you do and what I know you're doing within the investment space is to talk about money mindsets. What are some of the things that you've seen from people with regards to their money mindsets and some of the things you've had to work through to help people?
So, asset management has become relatively a commodity type business, right? Any advisor you work with should do a diversified asset allocation for you. They're going to rebalance the portfolio on a regular basis. They might do some type of Monte Carlo simulation, which is basically just a projection of what your retirement looks like and probabilities associated with it. And so what I found is the issue is even when they give you sound financial advice, is people always don't behave in the way that advice is meant to be given. And what I mean by that is you have a number of different biases that you have regarding how you think about money. You asked a great question in the beginning of, what shaped my way that I look money from my parents. A lot of us have different biases that are either personality issues, way that we grew up, things that we heard that affect us and how we make those financial decisions. So what you just said around FOMO is a really good example, right? That you're all of a sudden missing out on some type of thing that people are talking about. You want to talk about the same too. You missed out on one maybe 6 years ago and you're like, it's not going to happen again. And then you jump in. Well, those types of decisions you have to realize might not be sound financial advice. They're a way that you actually think, and it's a way that you process information that you're saying, this is why I should make an investment. And if you don't slow down enough to understand that you might have those biases or realize those biases are real, you might be making decisions that aren't in line with your financial goals. And so we just started a podcast called Mindset Meets Money that literally just breaks down all those biases. And they're in the 20-minute episodes with a doctor in financial services that works for me. He has like 36 other designations, a lot smarter than me. And so him and I just kind of sit there and walk through those biases and what we see with our clients and how that can make them make poor decisions, and then how you can identify them so you can make better ones.
Do most people have financial goals?
I think most people have financial goals in a sense that they know what they don't want, what they want or don't want regarding their financial life. They might not have it in the sense of, I want my net worth to be X, or I want to retire on this much income. It's more of a thought process of, listen, I don't want to be like my parents and have to work while they're retired and go back to work. And that might be the only thing that sticks in their head as their financial goal. It might be around the fact of, listen, I want work to be optional at 55, but I can never see myself not working. But I want to be able to say I don't have to work at 55. Most people's goals are tied around a philosophy or a mindset more than they are around a specific number. And working with a good financial advisor, their job is to take that idea of what you have in retirement and get it to be an actual physical number that you can start working to and back into to be able to achieve the lifestyle you want later.
And once you know the number, it's really simple to reverse engineer it. Figure out approximately what you need to do, what your returns are. Every year you can measure against it and you can see what it is. The biggest problem I have found with that, though, is, and you kind of mentioned it before, the goalposts keep moving. I just want to be a millionaire. Now I need 2 million. Now I need 4 million. Now I need 8 million. It kind of keeps creeping forward. Are most people aware of their biases and how they look at money?
No. And so you just gave another good example of one, right? Lifestyle creep. And the problem is people make more and more money, their lifestyle continues to creep up. And they don't even realize it's happening, and they don't realize the impact it has to their future if they're starting to be able to do that. In general, most people are not aware of, we have more, all of a sudden they see something on CNBC and there's something going on that's a buzz thing. Our calls just get completely, our phones just start ringing right away from clients ask questions. If there's a hot stock everybody's talking about, or they heard something around the water cooler, we get calls about that. We get calls about them wanting to take out money to invest in their friend's tech business, and they're in the friends and family round, and they're so excited to be early on. So we're constantly getting questions from people that they don't understand why they're asking it. And you can't tell them it's FOMO, right? Or something like that. You kind of walk them through the path of how it goes in line with their financial goal, their financial plan, help them understand why they're feeling and thinking this might be a sound investment, or it might be the reason to pull money out of the market now that we just, had a pullback of X amount percent, and why that might not be a good idea to sell at a low right now. So a lot of times a good financial advisor, just like a good therapist, will ask questions and allow you to start to understand why you're making those decisions so you can course correct.
Today's episode is sponsored by Profit Answer Man Podcast. Did you know that most small business owners hate looking at their financials? It's one reason they may struggle with business success. The Profit Answer Man podcast helps them ensure they are profitable and can pay their employees and weather the storms we all have to face. It's built on the Profit First methodology of pay yourself first. The Profit Answer Man podcast is a must listen to for every small business owner and anyone who wants to help them survive and thrive. Check it out on your favorite listening platform. And honestly, I always talk about that. I think most people need financial therapy, and it's much more of a financial therapist than a financial advisor, because a good financial advisor is managing your emotions and helping you through them. And I don't think most people realize that.
There's a study, and I'll screw it up a little bit, but you at least get the punchline. The average mutual fund, equity mutual fund, returns like 8.8%. But the average equity mutual fund investor gets 4.2%. So what's the disparity of it? The disparity of it is the decisions they make of buy high, sell low, the opposite of what you're supposed to do. And we see it all the time with clients. So most people are not aware of it. Most people are not in where they want from a financial life. If they have the means to be able to save, it is typically because they've made some poor decisions based on some biases or some mindsets that might be ones that aren't in line with them hitting their financial goals.
And I think that was the Dunbar study. I could be right. It's funny, though, because I forget, it was either Vanguard or Fidelity did a study of their best performing clients. And you know what they found they had in common?
They held on forever?
Pretty much. Either they were dead, and so they didn't do anything with the money, or they forgot they had an account. So they opened an account, they set an investment strategy, and they walked away from it. And the accounts just performed because humans didn't go in and muck it all up.
It's true. I mean, you'll see most time index are beating active managers. And the reason, we end up talking to clients, a lot of them is not because we think you should just invest in indexes, right? But really because you want that person to help guide you from making financial. I talk about there's 4 reasons you want a financial advisor. One is to keep you from making mistakes. It's buying something that you shouldn't buy because you heard it around the water cooler. The second one is to save you time. Anybody can go research, get their CFP, their certified financial planning. They can go through all the courses to be able to do it. You can learn everything you need to learn about financial services, but do you want to have the time doing it? Or do you want somebody to take that time and give you the pros and cons of each option? The other piece is the financial advisor hopefully increases your financial life. And it doesn't have to be just a return. It could be saving money in taxes. It could be helping convince you to save more on a monthly basis. But the last piece of why I think a lot of people hire financial advisors is peace of mind. It's knowing somebody else is there to be able to kind of walk you through how to hit your financial goals without you making poor decisions or emotional based decisions with that. And somebody there to bounce ideas off of. That it's not just you or somebody, your brother that you think's a financial whiz, to just listen to them for advice.
And I think that's quite true. I just find a lot of people, and I didn't realize this until much later in life, really struggle to talk about money because of all the negative emotions that might be around it. And because of that, they give up building wealth or anything else because they refuse to face it.
It's interesting, even with spouses that sit down with us, a lot of them have never talked about their financials, and they should, because we know it's one of the number one reasons for divorce, right? But they haven't even had the conversations with each other about how they think and feel about money. They haven't had the conversations with each other around what they want their lifestyle and retirement to look like, to see if it's even matched up and are they saving enough money or not. And I found a lot of people are uncomfortable even just talking about it, to anyone. So for me, my father always talked about it, right? Because I told you about the net worth sheet. And I'm in the business, so I always ask people how much money they make, how much money you have. That was a normal thing for me right out of college. But I'm surprised because I'll ask a question to a friend or somebody I'm close to, and you can see their faces visibly uncomfortable. But for me, I've always talked about money, so it's not a big deal. But you could tell, whether it's clients or even just people personally, that it is not something that people want to share or talk about and are comfortable with it. And, they put their head in the sand and they'll spend more time planning their vacation than they will planning their retirement.
That's a shame. And for me, at least, you have to retire to something. And I think the biggest conversations we're having these days is a lot of people I know don't want to retire. They want the freedom to do what they love, but they want to stay engaged. They want to keep learning, as you talked about. They want to do meaningful stuff, and they want to have fun. And if you can do that and make money too, it's great. Then there's no reason to retire.
No, you're right. We often don't even say retire. We when would you like work to be optional? Because most people get a negative feeling that you're trying to get them to retire. And so the concept of work being optional, they can get their minds around that freedom that you just brought up is an important piece for them to be able to feel, and they can plan towards that goal. But there's a study around retirement and how people deal with retirement. The first year of retirement's like the honeymoon, where they feel real good about it and they're okay with it. But after a year, they need to replace those social relationships they had in the workplace. They need to replace that feeling of importance and that feeling of whether it's recognition or feeling like the meaningful work. And so a lot of times people aren't taking the time to plan that. Just take a year, have fun, but know that at some point work gave you something besides an income, and you're going to have to replace that with some other type of activity. I've never met somebody that's not retired that all of a sudden it was happy. They put themselves into other types of endeavors, whether it's giving back to a charity, whether it's sitting on the board of HOAs in Florida is flooded with retirees that want to be able to have a purpose.
Do they want purpose or do they want power? Because those are two different things.
I was trying to be nice.
I sit on my board. I know.
Yeah.
And for us, it's about purpose. It's not about power. We leave people alone because it's just, you know what? Just be nice to your neighbors. Follow the basic rules and we'll all live a happy life. But I know some of them get a little crazy down there.
That's true.
So you've been quite successful in life. What is it that's allowed you? What's that secret that's allowed you to do that?
I think it's lots of things, but, you talked about goals and that. So one of the things I do every year, the end of the year, is I sit back and I look at what are my values. And I don't mean value like honesty, integrity, that type of thing. I mean, what do I value of where I want to spend my time? What is important and valuable in my life? And it usually ends up being 4 to 6 different things. Let's call it family, health, wealth, adventure. And I go, okay, these are my big things that if I spend time in there, I'm going to feel pretty good at the end of the week, the end of the day, the end of the month that I'm doing the right stuff. And I build goals around that. And so I take let's call it a value of family, right? And I'm going to make sure I have enough time that I feel that I've given to my family and I haven't given it too much to work, and make sure it's a priority. And that exercise I've done for 20 some years. And, I probably hit 70 or 80% of what I write down. I'm a little too aggressive a lot of times, but that's allowed me to achieve a lot of what I want to achieve. And The people that I then spend time with as the years progress keep getting me to think bigger and bigger of what it looks like and the impact that I could have in those areas. And so that exercise of determining what is important to me and then building goals around it and then surrounding myself with people that keep me thinking big and support me to doing it. And then the only other thing I would add to it is I break them down in the 90-day sprints. And I have goals by 90 days. I found if I have goals by a year, I sleep 9 months of the year and ignore them. If I have them by 90 days, the first month I get excited. The next month I don't do anything. And then I'm like, I got 3 more weeks. I'm like, I better just go run to the finish line. And then I focus in on hitting those 90-day goals. And that's worked really well for me, for the mild ADD I have, to be able to keep me focused.
Have you read 12-Week Year?
I have. And I read it last year, and I've been doing these 90-day sprints forever. And they did so much of a better job articulating it for what I do. So Brian Moran, he's ended up being a friend. We've had him come speak to my company a number of different times. He did a much better job building into process systems that I put across my whole company now, 12-week years. I still say 90-day sprints in my head because I've been doing it for so long, but we use the 12-week year. I literally tied all my employees' bonuses to it. So they don't have annual goals. They have goals all tied to 12 weeks. That's 50% of their bonus is tied to their 12-week year goal. So it's completely, through not just my own personal life, but through the rest of my organizations.
And so the underlying premise there is Parkinson's law. You will use up all the time and money allocated to whatever it is that you do. And just like you said, if it's not constrained, you'll waste it. And that's the problem with a year. You spend the first month or two, working on it. You forget about it for 9 months. Then you work on it for 1 month. So essentially, you worked on it for 3 months. You wasted 9 months. And that's the principle that's there. It's the same principle of profit first. It's Parkinson's law. And it's the same principle of wealth building, of when you constrain your spending and you kind of automate it and you do that, that's how you build wealth. And I've learned that looking backwards. I didn't realize it so much going forward, that how much automating these types of things and setting the goals and just letting them run in the background really makes a massive, massive difference.
I love you actually pointing out the idea of constraining your expenses, right? It's if I go back to my father, he always focused on top line, right? So that's kind of how I was raised, just drive revenue, drive sales. When I was an executive, they had so many controls and restraints on expenses and running the company. I didn't have to worry about it much. I'd have to get things approved a little bit in that, but there was bands of what you could charge, pay people. It was all this structure. I couldn't go crazy with spending. So I had to go drive revenue and sales for any of the organizations I was running. When I started running a business, it was a whole different deal. All of a sudden then I'm like, I'm the eternal optimist from a sales background. So I'm assuming everything's going to work. And I let my expenses get a little out of whack in the beginning. And so constraining your expenses and having processes or systems to constrain those expenses that aren't allowing you to make the opinion on everyone, I think is an understated skill that every business owner has to learn. And if they don't learn it the hard way, hopefully they can read a book like Profit First and be able to work with a consultant or people that are tied to it like yourself to be able to figure that out, because it's a very important process that made my 2 years a lot more stressful because I didn't understand it. All I worked about was just driving revenue, and I thought that would solve all the issues.
It doesn't matter how much money you make. It's how much you keep. And It's that same principle on the personal side. If you start automating all your savings and you just live within whatever you have left, you'll do fine. I always tell people, look around. Somebody is making 10 grand less than you, and they're just as happy as you. Where's that 10 grand? Go find it, set it aside, and just keep ratcheting it up 1% a year. You keep doing that. If you start out at 24, 25 and you save 1% a year, 20 years into it, you're at 20-something% savings rate right when you're going into the thick of your earning years. And you can do that. You're pretty much going to build wealth.
Yeah, that's the complete concept of the millionaire next door, right? Yeah. The idea of it. And it's relatively simple. I think the hard part is to be able to build those constraints in. And that's the idea of just dollar cost averaging, saying a monthly basis, coming right out of your checking account to go into savings on a regular basis, no matter what the market's doing, it's going in and saving. And that's it. There was one good part that came out of crypto is that people that were investing in crypto started talking about dollar cost averaging. I couldn't get clients to think about dollar cost averaging at all when it was. All of a sudden that became a buzzword, like that was cool. I was like, well, good. Now you started saving it. That's great. Let's start saving on a regular basis.
That was because it was dropping so fast.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly right. It was their sales pitch.
They needed to get into it. So one of the things you mentioned is you surround yourself with people who make you think bigger. I think this is where people get stuck. How do we find people to surround ourselves with who are going to push us to be bigger than we think we can be?
So throughout my career, I always kind of worked 3 mentors at each time, right? I'd pick a mentor of somebody that was in my existing job or existing type of role that was doing a lot better to me. I would pick somebody that was in kind of my industry, but was like maybe not doing exactly what I did, a lot more successful. And then I would pick somebody that was in a different industry. And what I would do is I would ask them to mentor me for 6 months, 30-minute call. I'll send them an agenda ahead of time. I'll send them with 48 hours. I'll text or email them right afterwards what I actually did and how I took their advice. And at the end of 6 months, they won't have to work with me again. And usually I had some warm introduction to do it. Those people got me to think a lot bigger and differently throughout the years. I hired a lot of coaches. I've gone through a number of different coaches at different time periods to get me to think bigger and differently. And I've grown out of coaches in different time periods. And then lastly, it's, certain organizations that you get involved in or groups. So like in my industry, they have, there's a common practice in financial services called study groups, where you take people, the business owners like me, and you find 4 or 5 of them and you go and you kind of share all your ideas and your best practices. The car dealers had the same thing. They call them 20 groups. It was a way to be able to meet people that were already farther along in their career or more successful than me and got involved in those study groups. And then the last one for me was YPO was a big one for me, the Young Presidents Organization. That was a big one for me to be able to surround myself with a lot of people that were more successful. And the only way I found that was because I was on a plane talking to somebody that was, just sold his business for a few $100 million. I was completely lost, scared what to do. I'm like, where do I go? Be my mentor and teach me. And he didn't want to mentor me and take the time to do it. He's like, this is an organization you should be involved in. And so people typically will help direct you in the right way if there's a nice personal warm introduction to them or some favorable way that you've been able to meet them. And it's not you just sending a cold email on LinkedIn.
But you have to ask.
You have to ask.
And I think that's the one thing people don't do. They don't ask, or they're afraid to ask somebody who's more successful than them to talk to them. And I don't think they realize that those people appreciate it too, because it's their way of giving back. It's their way of helping somebody who you're paying it forward, helping someone that maybe 20 years ago helped them to get to the success that they had.
That's exactly right. I've also always spent money on myself. Like I always believe my personal development is owned to me. It's not like the company I'm working for or somebody owes it to me. And so I've always invested in coaches and consultants to be able to help me out. I could quickly figure out if it's not positive or it's not working, but I've been fine spending money. And I know a lot of people it's a place where they cut an expense. Like I would rather not have the car I want and have a really good consultant or coach to be able to get me up and running to be bigger than it would be having a fun expense to do it. For me, personal development, like one of my values I said in the beginning is wisdom, right? And it's seeking wisdom. And part of that is I got to find people smarter than me to be able to help employ their wisdom on me that I can be able to learn from.
Are there any coaches or programs that you could recommend in general that people might look into, or are they all highly specific to an industry or a specific purpose?
As soon as you say that, I wish I had like a coaching program to pitch as soon as you said it. The answer's no. I can't think of anyone. Like, there's one, if you just ask around, people will start telling you which ones are the big ones in your industry to do. I think an industry coach is positive. I also think somebody outside is positive. And I think it's role dependent. Once you're a CEO and that you're looking at, an executive coach, which ends up being probably more money than you even made your first year when you were right out of school. You're paying more to a coach to be able to do it. But otherwise, you might just be new into a sales role where you just need a sales coach, which is going to be probably less than your car payment to be able to do. I think you got to figure out what best fits you. I think it starts out with listening to podcasts. It starts out with watching YouTube videos. It starts going into master classes. and you'll start to see and hear who might be the right people that resonate with you that you can reach out to. And a lot of those places that you're finding on YouTube and podcasts, they have programs that are, that you can be able to have one-on-one coaching with. And if you like what you're hearing on the podcast or like what you're reading in a book or like what you're seeing on YouTube, there's usually a program that you can be able to attach yourself to them.
And that's true. Most of them do marketing, and that's what they do is their marketing, right? They create content and they give a lot of it away for free, and you can consume it for free and implement. And essentially, I call it free coaching, right? A book or a video is essentially that type of work. And again, it comes back to the same thing. You'd be surprised what happens when you reach out to people. They will answer you.
I did a podcast interview a couple of weeks ago, and somebody wrote me on LinkedIn, and I, wrote them right back and started talking to them and started having a conversation with them. And they were an executive with another company trying to decide if they want to start a business. They were surprised I wrote back. I'm like, hey, people will take the time to be able to try to give some direction to it. I think at some point, you might have to add some value for them because they're getting reached out to a lot, especially if you have a podcast like yours. You might have a lot of listeners. It might be a lot of people reaching out. But in general, a lot of business owners that aren't out there doing different types of interviews, PR work, they want to be able to help and they want to give back.
And the other thing is successful people want to hang out with other successful people, and generally unsuccessful people don't ask for help. Successful people do. So it's kind of a natural selection. Hey, here's somebody who's up and coming. I want them in my network. And if I can plant a couple seeds in them, then it will grow and someday you get payback.
Yep, exactly right.
So let's just quickly touch on market conditions. We talked about the wild and crazy stuff, but what about the mundane stuff and what's kind of going on in the economy right now? What are you guys seeing?
You always have the news that is stressing people out right at that time, right? Which is around regional banks, SVB, and that's causing angst for a lot of people trying to see if there's something more systemic in the system that's going to cause a drop. Along with that, interest rates are making people uncomfortable, as the cost for your credit card, your auto loans, home mortgage is all going up. And seeing it. What we're also seeing across the board is that your inflation's costing business owners a lot more money because their payrolls are going up and their cost of goods are going up. And so margins are getting squeezed, and you're going to see that as it continues to drive prices, or it has business owners spending less for other different reasons. You put all that together with some of the geopolitical landscape with Ukraine and China and Putin and President Xi just sitting down and talking and saying that they have an agreement, that just scares people. The part I always tell people, you lay that whole background out. We can do that over the last 30 years, and I can paint pictures for you that's going to scare the hell out of you at every single time going through it. And that's just how it is, right? It's not going to change the fact of when you want work optional. It's not going to change the fact of when you need to pay for your kids' college education. And so no matter where you are in life, you're always going to need a smart place to be able to pull money out of. And so how do you ignore some of the noise and keep focusing on the right stuff? And I think of like a guy walking up a hill. You're trying to build a pile of money and you're walking up the hill. And the news is like this yo-yo. And all you're doing is reading this yo-yo going up and down and stressing you out. You got to get off of reading the yo-yo back and forth and go worry about getting up the hill to be able to do it. It doesn't change the fact that you got to save on a monthly basis. It doesn't change the fact that you should have a diversified asset allocation portfolio. We can argue that maybe you should be moving away from certain areas that inflation is going to affect it more. Maybe that, you already missed the fact that tech got beat up and you're trying to decide if you should move out of tech or into tech on it, right? We can argue about some of the market timing, but I think for you in general, it's trying to stay away from getting too excited about the noise and continue to focus in on the fundamentals for you to be able to reach your goals, that when you need money, you got a smart place for it.
And it's funny, the more you watch these guys, and if you actually write it down and pay attention to what they say and what the outcomes are, I think you'll quickly learn and be shocked that most of the time they're wrong and occasionally they're lucky. And it's just the way it goes. Their job is they have one simple job: to keep you listening long enough that you'll get to the commercial, because that's when they get. And the only way they can do that is to keep you excited. And you just have to learn to turn it off. And same is true of social media and everything else. Put your head down, do what you need to do, turn the yo-yo off, and life is much simpler.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, and listen, this is a interesting time, and I'm not discounting the fact that right now there's a lot more uncertainty than maybe there was, and it felt like 5 years ago. But if you believe in the U.S. economy longer term, you believe the U.S. is still going to be a standing country after a while, then, you're not just going to go run to cash and be worried about it. You're going to stay invested in a way that is in line with your financial goals. And so I think it's a hard time, though, because the country is so polarized. And I think it's a hard time right now because, we're worried of what that geopolitical landscape is going to look like. And we're worried about inflation, all stuff that we haven't dealt with in a really long time. And so I think, that nervous piece that everybody feels is going to keep the markets jittery. You're going to still see inflation in the Fed consistently, even no matter what's going on, trying to tamp down inflation. And that's going to be a constant process we're going to be dealing with for a while.
And it does take a while. I think a lot of people thought up front that this was going to be over in days or months, or that the Fed's just going to start printing again. And all I can say is, if the Fed lets off, it will cause far more problems than if they just take us through a little bit of winter and let's clean it up and let's get back to growth again in the future. But you got to go through cycles, and they are normal. And I think we forget how often they are. We forget how often bubbles occur. We tend to forget history in general.
Yep.
And it's surprising what happens when you actually look at it and pay attention.
It's true. And I think one of the best things you could do, there's actually a good book called The Psychology of Money that does a decent job in kind of helping you there. But there's lots of books that Random walked on Wall Street. I mean, there's so many different books you can read to try to get that historical perspective, or at least understanding the mindset of what the historical perspective can help you be able to deal with what's happening right now. And so that learning of history and understanding the different markets and what's happened will help give you perspective right now. And it's just something you got to constantly remind yourself. Listen, I still got to remind myself of it because it's easy to get all dorked up when you're, your payroll's going up, you're seeing expenses going up, you're seeing revenue going down, like in different areas. You can easily get lost in it. And you got to just take a step back sometimes and try to get perspective of when you might have felt that way before, or when other people dealt with similar situations like yourself.
And usually I find nothing in life is new. It's just repetitive of a different rhyme. Humans have been through this before. They'll go through it again. You just got to learn to keep your head down and keep going.
It's true. It's true.
It's time to learn the secrets of life. What's your secret to living an abundant life?
Secret to living an abundant life is to make sure you have a clear sense of what your values are, and making sure that your everyday activities are in line with those values, and you'll feel abundant for whatever that is, your definition of abundance.
And so there's two things there. One, your definition, right? Not somebody else's. And two, taking the time to be clear about what you want. You do those two things and you can have it all.
I realize my stress is highest when whatever I'm doing during the day for too many days in a row isn't in line with what's important to me. All of a sudden, if I haven't seen my family or kids in a while because I've been working too much, I feel stressed. All of a sudden, if I haven't worked out for a few days because I'm too busy running around doing everything else, I feel stressed. It's typically because what I'm doing during the day isn't in line with my values.
Bring the alignment. What did you learn later in life that you wish you would have learned sooner?
Not to take things personally. It's not to take things personally. I think if someone did a certain business deal that hurt me, I'm taking it personally. If someone, said something that was all their issue, I took it personally. And I think that caused a lot of worry for me or stress for me that I didn't need to at all early on in life. And in general, nothing people do is personal. It's usually all about themselves, and somehow they're pushing it on you. And that's a really hard thing to actually get in practice, but it was a very important lesson for me.
Very much Stoic philosophy, and learning to let go and not taking it on you, realizing it's all about them and letting it be. If you were to give an 18-year-old one specific piece of wisdom, what would it be? Be
very careful who you choose to be in your life. whether your spouse is a huge decision you have to make, the friends that you're surrounding yourself with, your first boss is going to be one of the most impactful people on your work ethic. The people you're putting around in your life is going to have a much bigger influence than you think or want to believe.
You're the average of the 5 people around you. And so you have to pick wisely. And I don't, it's funny because I always think about neighborhoods. People go and they buy a house. Well, now you got these neighbors and you didn't pick them. Be very careful and think through where you're putting yourself, because that's just one major part of your life is you're going to choose to live around people, and we don't always get to pick them.
I've seen people pick awful business partners, and I've seen people pick spouses that are not good fits, and their life is so miserable from what, they share at that point. And all they had to do is choose somebody different. And for some reason, they did not take that decision as serious as they probably should have.
Shiny objects.
Yep, exactly right.
If people would like to learn more about you and your companies, what's the best way for them to do that?
You can take a look at mycoastalwealth.com as my large company. You can find me on Twitter at Jeremy Straub or on Instagram at JM Straub. And then we have a new podcast coming out, Mindset Meets Money. I'd love for you to be able to check that out. You can probably just Google that in any podcast thing or check it out on Instagram.
Cool. And we will go ahead and put those in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Awesome. Thanks, Rocky. Appreciate it.
Do you have mentors and coaches? Do you reach out to people and take responsibility for your personal development? As I've mentioned before, I've spent 6 figures in this area, and I still spend a lot on personal development. Just the other day, I had a conversation about a $20,000 coaching package. Not sure if that's what I want to say yes to. Again, right? We started with that, learning what to say yes and no to. But I'm spending in other areas, and I continue to learn and improve. Big fan of Parkinson's Law, right? Limiting your time and money so that you can be more resourceful. And at the end, you have more time and money. This is one of those universal laws, and one that I live by all the time. It's how I manage my time every year. And it's what allows me to say no to certain things and say yes to others and be much more intelligent about it. Are you clear on what you want? And is the thought of work optional interesting to you? It's the way I live now, in control of my time and doing what I love. Figure out the path for you and what steps you need to take to get there. It's a lot easier than you can imagine. By the way, if you enjoyed today's episode, I'd really appreciate it if you'd support it by forwarding it to a friend who might enjoy it as well, or sharing it wherever you typically share podcasts. Next week, we're going to talk about going from chaos to clarity with Siobhan Moran. I know you're going to enjoy it. Thanks for listening. Have an abundant week.